A professional stonemason should install your Old World Stoneworks range hood. The mason should exercise extreme caution in handling heavy stones and must adequately secure the range hood to the wall. Old World Stoneworks is not responsible for the safety or quality of the installation, personal injury, or property damage resulting from improper installation. This video depicts one possible method for installing the range hood. Your professional mason may use another equally effective method. The mason should comply with manufacturer's instructions, warnings, and safe work practices while using tools and materials, including scaffolding and acid, to install your range hood. Congratulations on your recent purchase of stone products from Old World Stoneworks. In this particular installation, there are two fireplaces, an overmantel, and a range hood. Today, we will be concentrating on the range hood. The first thing to do upon arrival of the crates is to open the crate and check the stones. Also, within the crate, you should find the instructions for the installation. These instructions include numbers on each and every stone, and likewise, as you unpack the crate and check the stones, they will have corresponding numbers. We want to make sure that everything is here, including the bag of sand, which is very important. In case of any damaged stones, call 800-600-8336 within 7 days from the date of delivery. Before calling, unpack all stones. Have your packing list in hand so that you may provide us with the correct stone number to be replaced. Level, drill, non-impact, grinder, 3/4 inch spade, drill bit, epoxy, 5-minute Bondo or construction adhesive such as liquid nail, putty knife to mix the epoxy, 4-inch L brackets, 2-inch corner brackets, 2-inch screws, plastic anchors, 1/2 inch nut, 1/2 inch flat washer, 3/4 inch screws, 1/2 inch dowel rods, which may be used from the cut pieces of the all thread in the corbel or header returns, brick ties, spacers, 1/8, 1/4, or 3/8, 1x2 for guide, 1x4 for strut, 2x4 for corbel support, blue masking tape, plastic tarps, and or drop cloths to be used to protect the floors and countertops during installation. Type in white mortar mix, 3 5-gallon buckets, 1 for mixing the grout and 2 for cleaning process, 2 sponges, rubber gloves, a garden sprayer or mister, tape measure, shop brush, scaffolding, and suggested sealant Primapel 200. It's time now for the installation, and there's a few things I'd like to point out. Additional support in the form of 2x12s are required in the wall behind the location of the corbels and header return. The 2x12s will be stacked. The header return is the stone that rests on top of the corbels. In most of our range hood designs, these stones will have all thread and must be anchored securely to the wall. These are the spacers that we apply before setting the plinth block in place on the countertop. You might also call it a foot. The corbel rests on top of the plinth. You will see he's also got spacers to hold it away from the wall, the same 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch spacers have been placed on the plinths to ensure proper spacing for the corbel. Here we're checking to make sure both plinth blocks are equal and level. He's taken his level and he's set everything up so that he knows exactly where to drill his holes for the all thread. Before drilling the hole, the all thread must be measured for accuracy and location. The holes are drilled. The all thread can now be measured and any excess cut. While the stone is outside, it is best to test fit your washer and nut. Shaving off barbs beforehand will make this process easier. And after the all thread has been cut, the excess can be used as the dowel pin for the header. Here we see the mason mixing the fiberglass epoxy. You want to make sure any oil that may have separated and floated to the top has been stirred into the mix. Then we will add the hardener. Now this must be blended evenly to create the epoxy. You have a limited amount of working time once the two are together. He's folding it in as you would fold in bread dough. The corbel is being test fitted prior to installation. The epoxy is applied to the holes rather than to the all thread. This makes for a cleaner application when the mason inserts the all thread into the holes. And now they're preparing to lift the corbel into place and put it into the epoxied holes. From there, in less than 5 minutes, it will be set up harder than rock. Once the stone is in place, it will dry within 5 minutes. It must be held still. You want to make sure that you are aligned with the plinth block or foot. He is now preparing anchors for the top of the corbel, which secure it to the wall. This is done with 4-inch L brackets. He's now preparing holes for the anchors in the top of the corbel. The second corbel is now ready for installation. They are test fitting it to make sure that the holes align with the all thread. The epoxy is applied to the holes rather than to the all thread. Now you're ready to lift the corbel and put it into place. L brackets are being screwed to the wall. After the L brackets have been attached, it is time to anchor the all thread. It should be hand tight, snugly, but be careful not to over tighten. Be sure that the plinth and the corbel are level. Once the corbels are mounted, it's time to cut a 2x4 brace, and it should fit very snugly. You can use spacers under it and above it to make it fit. This will help bear the additional weight while we're working on the header. Let's recap. We have unpacked the crates. We have checked our stones. We brought them in and installed the plinth or foot. On top of the plinth, we have installed the corbel, epoxied it into place, and attached it to the wall with 4-inch L brackets and 2-inch screws. Finally, we anchored the all thread with a 1/2-inch washer and nut. Here we're checking all distances and getting the center marks so that we'll be able to mount it directly centered over the cook stove. All right, Joel, you're on the line. 57 3/4. We're determining the overall length, and then we'll cut that in half to find the center mark. Once your dimensions have been checked outside, then we come in and drill the actual holes. These will secure the header return to the wall, and from there the header will be placed on the face. The all thread has been cut to fit. The barbs from your cut are ground off. The header return is test fitted, and then the epoxy is applied just as it was on the corbel. The header return is being put into place on top of spacers above the corbel and into the holes filled with epoxy. Standard plastic anchors are used to put screws into the stone and secure the L brackets. After the L brackets have been attached, it's time to anchor the all thread. It should be hand tight, but snug. Be careful not to over tighten. Spacers are placed in between the stones. Anywhere stone touches stone, there's a spacer in between. The header is the heaviest piece of the entire project. He's checking now the dowel holes and pins. The pins are being placed into the dowel holes and epoxied. This will hold the header on the face. Brick ties are being applied to the header return. With the corbels and the header returns in place, we're now prepared to put the header on. We are now anchoring the header to the header returns using anchors and screws into the stone. And again, we check to make sure everything is square and plumb. Epoxy is being added in the corners for additional strength. It's a good idea to locate and mark your studs prior to installing the overhood. The mason is finding the center of the stone and will be placing a 1x2 guide for the first row of stones to rest against as he builds the overhood portion. And now he's starting the first row of stones on the overhood with the left corner, and it'll be followed by the right corner, and then the center stones will go into place. The mason is securing the overhead stones to the wall with 2-inch L brackets and 3/4-inch screws. He's now applying the 1x2 guide, which will support the front leading edge of the 2 center stones that go in between the corners. It will help hold it up while he fastens it from the inside into place. After cutting a wooden strut to support this stone, he's able to put the first of the 2 center stones in place. The strut has been constructed out of 1x4 to hold the center stones in place. The strut is epoxied into place and will become permanent. It's important that the mason check to make sure everything is level, because everything that's built above it will depend upon being level. And here's the mason checking his space for the joint with a spacer, a 1/4-inch spacer. Additional corner brackets are being applied with epoxy for added strength and rigidity. And that brings us to the second course. The first 2 courses are the only courses that actually have a curve when you're applying this particular range hood top. Our next row will be a flat row, which goes within 3.5 inches of the ceiling, because that's the thickness of the crown. The straight sides are going up on either side at this moment, and he's already put the L brackets on while it was on the ground. And now we're screwing the left side to the wall to secure it, and then we'll begin the front. Leveling is essential to a good installation, and it's important from the ground up. If you're off as much as 1/8 of an inch at the bottom, you'll be off 3/4 of an inch by the time you get to the top. He's centering everything up to make sure everything aligns. After the top row is put in place, the crown will be installed, and then we can begin the grouting process. The spacers have been added, and the first piece of the crown is installed. The center piece of the crown is put into place, allowing for the same amount of reveal on the left and right. The crown then dresses everything up and puts a finishing touch on the range hood as it joins the ceiling. And once we get the crown in place, we'll be wetting the entire thing down and grouting every joint. You have 1/4-inch grout joints throughout, and then cleaning it up, and then you'll have a completed range hood. And now, with all the stones in place, the wooden bracing that was placed earlier to hold the stones can now be removed. Epoxy has been generously applied. A 1/2-inch bead of liquid nail has been applied to the back of every joint. This serves 2 purposes. 1, it holds all of the stones together, and 2, it prevents mortar from falling through while we grout. In preparation for the grouting, masking tape is being applied all around the range hood. This will protect the wall when the grout is applied. We wet the stones in this process before grouting them. Stone is somewhat like a sponge. It's very absorbent, and we want to fill the stone with water so that the grout won't sink into the stone any further than where we want it to be. We are now prepared to make our grout. We use white mortar mix type N, non-sanded. We use the sand that came with your range hood. It is mixed on a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts sand and 1 part white mortar mix type N. In this instance, the mason is using 2 parts sand and 1 part white mortar mix. He will be adding the 3rd part of sand later as he mixes. Then the water will be added. You can tell when the color is consistent that it is thoroughly blended. Slowly add the water until it is the consistency your mason would like. The sponge allows him to introduce the water a little at a time. The consistency we are looking for is something like a thick cake icing. The water is slowly folded in to give it a consistent mix. You don't want any lumps or white specks of mortar showing. And now, we allow the mix to slake for about 5 minutes before using. The floor and countertops are being protected with plastic and drop cloths during the grouting process.
You can tell by the beautiful, consistent, warm brown color that the stone is now thoroughly wet. It will dry, and when it does, it will lighten considerably. It's important to keep all work surfaces clean. Your grout will adhere better, and it makes a neater job. Cleaning is essential. You don't want the grout to stain the stone. A wet sponge is used for wiping it away. And because we've already wet the stones, we're not forcing the grout into the stone. The stone is already full of water. Keep your water clean. A clean project is a beautiful project. More grout is being applied to the face of the stone. This really ties the project together and gives it that clean, beautiful, finished look. In this instance, the grout is being applied by hand. We don't want to use metal instruments near the stone. We don't want to damage or scratch the stone.
Joints should be flush, not concave.
It's important in cleaning with the sponge to wipe across the joints, not with the joints. We don't want them to become concave. As the stone becomes a little bit dry, we must also re-moisten it. We want to keep it wet while we're grouting. Now that the project is complete, he's brushing the project down with a shop brush.
The 2x4 supports may now be removed since the grouting process has been completed.
After cleaning and brushing down the unit, wash it thoroughly with scalding hot water. When the unit dries, the stones will become splotchy in color, and then when it completely dries, they will be all the same color.
The stone may need to be acid washed after installation. If an acid wash is necessary, it is required to follow all warnings on the bottle of muriatic acid. This may include the use of goggles, rubber gloves, and/or a filter mask. An acid wash should be conducted in a well-ventilated room. Acid washing instructions are included with your installation packet. A sealant should be applied to the range hood. The suggested sealant is Primapel 200 made by Chemprobe. You may call them to order your sealant.
We now have the hood mounted. The stones are wet and we'll have to wait for it to dry. Sometimes it takes as long as 2 to 3 weeks for the stones to dry. The drying process will cause the stone to become blotchy momentarily until it's totally dry. When it's finally dry, it will even out to a consistent color throughout.
A professional stonemason should install your Old World Stoneworks range hood. The mason should exercise extreme caution in handling heavy stones and must adequately secure the range hood to the wall. Old World Stoneworks is not responsible for the safety or quality of the installation, personal injury, or property damage resulting from improper installation. This video depicts one possible method for installing the range hood. Your professional mason may use another equally effective method. The mason should comply with manufacturer's instructions, warnings, and safe work practices while using tools and materials including scaffolding and acid to install your range hood.